performance at the Combine caused them to go back and look at his game film one more time. And what they found was his team made a scheme change in his final season that forced him to shift to a new role he wasn't exactly comfortable in. To draw a comparison, they looked at his first 3 seasons before the change, and he looked like a much different player. The speed and level he played at matched what they saw him do back at Indy. He rose up draft boards across the league, and they're very lucky to have picked him up before anyone else could.
The Mexico City Conquistadors are now on the clock.
She don't seem to understand what she wants to do.
The San Antonio Marshals are now on the clock.
Kelly's off the board, Adam. What do you have on him?
The foundation of any good team starts up front, and here's a guy who's a franchise's dream come true. GMs I talked to pointed to several of his games in college where he took on some of the nation's best defensive linemen, going toe-to-toe with them for 60 minutes of brutal trench combat and dominating them. He's going to be able to protect the franchise quarterback in addition to opening up holes for the run game. With size, speed, and strength, he should have a very successful NFL career.
She's got a rebel heart. She's had it from the start. Out there on the run again. She's got a rebel heart. One day she's gonna fall. She's got a rebel heart. She's up against them all.
The Broncos are now on the clock.
Ooh, love, it's in my bones, it's in my soul. You're never gonna break
The San Antonio Marshals are now on the clock.
running through my veins.
The Saints are now on the clock.
No, I won't drop. You're never gonna slow me down. I've got the energy of a tidal wave.
The Chicago Tigers are now on the clock.
You don't gotta believe in me. I know who I wanna be. You don't gotta believe in me. Gotta believe in me.
The Patriots are now on the clock.
Let's go to Adam now, who's got more on the Patriots' last pick.
He was dismissed from the team earlier this year after reportedly not showing up to several organized team activities. This immediately raised some red flags among scouting circles around the league. However, I've been told that he came off as very sincere during the Combine, telling teams that he was a team player and he won't make the same mistakes again. That sounds good on paper, but this team will find out very soon if he can back it up.
Nobody's gonna hold me underneath. You don't gotta believe in me. I know who I wanna be. You don't gotta believe in me. Gotta believe in me. Gotta believe in me. Gotta believe in me. You don't gotta believe in me. You don't gotta believe in me. Gotta believe in me. Gotta believe in me. For me to give all
The London Monarchs are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock.
Midwest, and it all reminds me of California.
The Seahawks are now on the clock.
Like California, California, AATLMIA, all reminds me of California, cause there's no place like California, California, New York, Texas.
All right, team is now off the clock. Adam Schefter, can you tell us about their newest player?
A consistent performer his entire college career, he went out on a high note in his final game, recording 3 interceptions and being named the player of the game. General managers have been simply drooling over the opportunity to draft him, with one telling me he's as close to a sure thing as there is in this draft. He'll have plenty of opportunity to showcase his coverage skills this season, as he'll likely line up against some of the NFL's most elite wide receivers.
The Jets are now on the clock.
Now that the Jets have made their pick, let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about him.
He was credited with having one of the biggest plays in college football this season. Late in the game, he picked off the quarterback and ran the entire field to score the game-winning touchdown. He did everything a coach would want to see, from baiting the quarterback to reading the downfield blocks. He flashed enough playmaking ability in that game and the remainder of the season to draw a lot of interest this offseason. This team has to be pretty happy with this pick.
Cause there's no place like California, California, California.
All right, now that the pick's in, let's go to Adam. Adam, what can you tell us about this guy?
He's a ferocious defender whose speed makes him a nightmare for offenses when he blitzes. After setting the team record for sacks in a game, he soared up draft boards. Scouts I spoke with raved about his football IQ, feeling he could captain a defense in a matter of years. Sources tell me that aside from his fierce reputation to get to the quarterback, his true value is that he can impact the game mentally as well as physically. Opposing offensive coordinators will need to give great thought to assigning a back or tight end to stay at home and block him during pass plays. This eliminates an offensive weapon and shifts the balance of power to the defense. Not many linebackers in this league garner that type of attention, making him a special talent.
California, California, AATLMIA.
All right, let's go to Adam Schefter, who's got more on this pick.
Matt Miller was glued to the ongoing soap opera that was his story this season. A feared pass rusher, he couldn't quite seem to play with the same intensity on a week-to-week basis. Some weeks he looked absolutely unstoppable, terrorizing opposing quarterbacks. Others he looked out of place, struggling to make any sort of impact, even taking himself out of the game multiple times in fits of frustration. Some GMs I spoke to felt that his lack of consistency was due to a lack of maturity, something that can be easily addressed by the right coaching staff. This pick could have tremendous upside or could end up as a what could have been story. It should be interesting to see how this saga plays out.
Hey, I put money, I can match it for ya. I'm in this all white fit, looking like a brick and all them zippers on a jacket on ya. He got a thing for Latin. He wanna hear a little Spanish? I told him it ain't practice it. I'm about to fill you up with Scottish rain. Walk up with the click and I ain't looking like the side in this. I'm the opposite cause I'm the main event in boxing and it has a time to ticking. I've been out here playing my position, I'm about to get it. Now ain't no one about to block the hit cause someday I'm someone to tell me I'm someone doing alright.
The Raiders are now on the clock.
Someone is somebody that one day will be the love of my life, but not tonight though. Hey, I'm only here for a minute. Bet you want a girl to keep it independent, and I know you gotta like a girl that's this appealing. Get you caught up in the moment, then I'll get you in your feelings. Tell your boys that you gon' meet them later on. Both of us are so taxi, leave the meter on. First time you out in Cali, never tried no this strong, so you gon' have some stories to tell when you take it back home and tell them one time, Snowy always showed you what it's like. Leave you sleepy like the call the umpire. Get you you out and get you rolling, get you gotta go, I got a flight up in the morning.
The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Mexico City Conquistadors are now on the clock. The San Antonio Marshals are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Toronto Thunderbirds are now on the clock.
He trying to catch me in my feelings, but he don't know that I'm the though. Shout out to my that can get it independent and ain't looking for no love though.
The Broncos are now on the clock.
But he don't know that I'm the though. He trying to stunt and give me drinks. I got the bottles in the section and I promise to pay. Turn up the bass.
Turn up, turn up, turn up, turn up.
The Seahawks are now on the clock.
I'm at the pearly gates, but they won't let it in. I told the devil, I said, I ain't trying to sin, yeah. No, I ain't trying to sin, yeah. Pray to the Lord, Daddy, let me in.
The Saints are now on the clock.
I'm breaking in.
The Chicago Tigers are now on the clock.
Our very own Adam Schefter has more to say about this pick.
The main concern scouts have expressed to me is his lack of proper footwork technique. At the combine, he stumbled several times during pass blocking drills, even falling once or twice. It'll take more than being physically gifted to block in the NFL. He's going to need to work on his ability to bend and maintain proper balance when moving around. Right now, pass rushers would have a field day getting him off balance and pushing him aside, but I've been told by coaches that his footwork can definitely be worked on. Grace isn't his strong suit right now, but we'll see if that can change.
I'm breaking in.
The Cowboys are now on the clock.
Now that the Cowboys have made their pick, let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about him.
I heard he surprised several scouts at his pro day when he showed up looking a lot leaner, and the difference showed when he went through drills. He turned in slightly faster times than expected in every major drill and displayed improved footwork compared to how he looked at the tail end of the season. I've heard from a few different coaches that they'd like to see him put some weight back on, yet keep playing as quick as he currently is. Whether he does that or not, I think we'll see him on the line on Sundays.
One foot in a dip, another one going in the fire.
this aching pain. When you're
The Jaguars are now on the clock.
like a burning ship that sets the sails to you. Fingertips,
The Ravens are now on the clock.
my lips, make me sing that holy
Let's go to Adam Schefter now, who's got more to say about the Lions' latest pick.
Long talked about as a top 3 defensive back prospect, his draft stock fell dramatically after a series of consecutive struggles late in the season against inferior wide receivers. Many speculated that these struggles were due to a series of nagging injuries, a theory which may have been validated by his strong performance at his pro day. I was able to talk with several GMs about him at the Combine, and they told me he possesses the raw physical skills needed to become a top-tier NFL defensive back. 3 skills in particular were mentioned by every GM I spoke to: exceptional physicality at the line of scrimmage, a nose for the ball, and better hands than most receivers they've seen and scouted. The reason for his collegiate struggles may forever be shrouded in mystery, but they'll soon be forgotten if he's able to realize his full football potential.
The Bears are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Orlando Sentinels are now on the clock.
There are men, and there are giants. Bass and stills in the building, flash the camera. I'ma drop the hammer. Things done changed the hip-hop since and Bobby out the slammer. Hip-hop start on the East Coast and then move west now down to Bama. I'ma bring it back to New York, hold those and throw your hands up. Pass me a cup of the in the club with the juice in the get bent out. Then I'ma slide with it to my ride and head up to my penthouse. Oh, I'm not trying to take it slow, working hard, caking dough. Open up 24, we striving for that goal.
I'll stop for nothing, I will play this game that's so easily started, not so easily parted. Giants, everything is shaking through the walls. We are giants, heart of David, you know it takes just one.
The Raiders are now on the clock.
CNN, this is Ghetto Editorial.
Adam, what can you tell us about the Raiders' newest player?
Like football, rugby's a sport that's played with guys of all shapes and sizes. In his case, he was one of the big guys pushing and pulling blocks in the center of the pitch. He was playing rugby for a university in Australia before he was recruited to transfer and play football for 2 seasons here in America. His first year was spent adjusting to the game, getting used to the different rules and how to play his position properly. The guy even had to adjust how he tackled now that he had to wear pads and a helmet. But his second year is really where we started to see what he could potentially do. He's a physical player at the line of scrimmage. The team was able to pick up a good addition to its line with a bit of an interesting history.
Everything is shaking through the walls. We are giants,
The Redskins are now on the clock.
Novus ordo seclorum, e pluribus unum. They change it
The Toronto Thunderbirds are now on the clock.
and fracking soils, wild bulldozing forest, but they can't defeat us. They could not destroy us.
dreaming the same dream of money, guns, and gasoline.
For the average team, CFOs are after cream. GMOs extracting genes with everyone on my GPS.
Everything is shaking through the walls. 'Cause we are My second body cost a lot. After I bought it, I just wore it home. Reading philosophy and gossip rags. Spending my bottom dollar on my toes. I'm a pacifist who's never not been pacified. I'm a piece of... It's a point of pride. I'm a super rich complaint.
The Seahawks are now on the clock.
Cry, baby, cry, oh, cry, baby, cry, oh. I don't really care where I stand in the winner's circle. Make room for a man from the middle with you. I don't even know how I got to the finish, but don't care, don't make no difference to me. I don't understand what you're saying, only kinda listen. Make room for a man on a mission with you. I don't even know how I got to the finish, but don't care, don't make no difference. I lost the weight and then I start to tumble. My mom betrayed me many years ago. I walk alone to keep from slipping under. Got lost as soon as I stepped out the door. I'm the martyr who just never.
The Saints are now on the clock.
I'm a punk kid, no reason why. Nothing finer than the taste of tears running down my face. So cry, baby, cry.
The Chicago Tigers are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock.
Man from the middle with you. I don't even know how I got to the finish, but don't care, don't make no difference to me. I don't understand what you're saying, only kinda listen. Make room for a man on a mission with you. I don't even know how I got to the finish, but don't care, don't make no difference.